You recognize that tune, and you know it's time for Relics Radio. This is a family-friendly show, so the entire family can join us as we talk metal detecting and relic hunting. You can call into the show at 270-495-0315 or join in the chat and post any comments or questions you might have, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. You're listening to Relics Radio of Southern Kentucky and Middle Tennessee. All right, and you are live on Relics Radio tonight. If you're listening at 8 Eastern Time on May the 10th, that is. If you're listening on the archive version, that probably will not be true. But we are live here in the foothills of the Cumberland Mountains along the Cumberland River. I am your host, Diggin with 7.
And I'm your co-host, Tennessee Jeff.
Flying by the seat of our pants tonight, I'll tell you. There's always something going on. I'll tell you what, if you are going to be a broadcaster, I'll just give you guys a little tip. And any of these other guys that are doing it will tell you the same thing. You better have nerves of steel, one. And you better not get frustrated and flustered real easy. And you need a little bit of engineering skill as well. It was 5 minutes till showtime, and we had some things drop out, and I had to restart a whole lot of things and send texts to Jeff and our guest and everything. But we're up and running. Those kind of things happen. I hope that they don't happen on the show tonight, but you know how it is. Internet is not a perfect situation, but we're going to make it as perfect as we can tonight. And we've got a good show lined up, don't we, Jeff?
We sure do. We got Anthony Hochstetler, and then we're planning on talking about pit digging and then bottle digging and everything like that. So, I mean, right now the chat room, it's filling up right now. So we've got there's Jordan, we got Ken, Tim. Hey, there's Tim. There's Forrest. There's Jesse. So and then we got Chris. I'm going through it. They're going quicker than I can say them.
Yeah, Bill Hayes, Jesse Rogers.
Bill, yeah, he was the first one.
Forrest
Hello, Bill.
Chris Heimsoff is in. Woody, I'm going back through now. And Josh from Beyond Sight and Sound came in. Jeff Ford. I'm like you. There's way too many people to try and name right now. But you know that we love you guys. How are you doing tonight, Tony?
Oh, yeah, we could.
Doing great, man. How are you guys?
Well, we're just great, and we've been so excited. And whenever I put out, I got a hold of Tony the other day and had him send me a picture, and we kind of got together on what phone number he wanted me to call him on, and I put out a promo on our social media channels, and I tell you what, we've had a lot of interest in this. A lot of people know you. A lot of people are interested in what you do.
Nice. Well, it's a blessing to hear that, and it's very humbling.
Now, Jeff knows you better than I do. I seen you at the Glebe Farm. I've seen the top of your head at the Glebe Farm. You were down in a hut there. That's how most everybody recognizes you, I guess, is just seeing the top of your head and a bunch of dirt.
Just watch for the dirt pile.
How long have you known?
That's right.
How long have you known him, Jeff?
Well, since my first DIV, of course, we got to the pre-hunt meeting, and I remember, of course, he was on the medical team, and he gave his telephone number out at the pre-hunt meeting, and then, of course, his telephone just lit up. Everybody pulled their phone out, and you could hear it. It was quiet, but you could hear everybody toot, 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 putting their number in the phone, and then here you go, you had people calling him, and then so I mean it's been a while back. So, but I mean he was the go-to guy if I had a seizure or anything like that. So, but yeah, I mean it never fails that he always had good finds, and I seen he found it was an ID badge next to someone's hole that they dug, and just missed that one target.
Exactly in the hole. Yeah, it was on the sidewall of someone's hole, which was amazing. It almost made me think they dug a nail out or something, and just didn't hear the ID tag in the side. That was a crazy day, man. I tell you right now.
What got you into
that? Was the Wisconsin camp, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was. It was Wisconsin Hill. Sure was.
Yeah. What got you into digging huts and pits and what have you?
Well, it was definitely DIV. DIV is where I was exposed to it. I would say watching other people do it, and watching such a concentration of relics in a small area, because you're looking at a 3-foot by 3-foot time capsule that was literally built for the purpose of receiving relics. That's what's amazing. I mean, the amount of relics that you have the potential of finding in a trash pit are, in my opinion, much higher than just surface hunting in general, because number one, most of the areas that we hunt have been hunted pretty good by now. This is 2018, and number two, the very purpose of those pits was to put relics in them. Of course, they didn't call them relics back then; they just called it trash.
Yeah, and
that's right. And then you never know. Of course, I dug a trash pit here. One of my best ones it had a sword belt plate in it, and then that's when I got the GPX. And then this farm had been pounded, and then I got that signal with the GPX and dug down, and it was a sword belt plate. And then found the sword hanger, and then no full bottles. See, that's eluded me. I have never found a really full good bottle from the Civil War.
It's coming. Well, you've got a handle on. If you've dug your first pit, then you've got a handle on the way that things are supposed to work. You've got an idea of what to watch for, and it's just a matter of time. I told that to my buddy. Gary Alexander, who lives in Lenoir City, Tennessee, not far from you guys, and just a great friend. And a bottle eluded him for probably 5 or 6 years, but I just kept on. I said, Gary, don't give up. I said, one of these days, you're going to get that signal that puts you down in a pit, and you're going to get a bottle. And he finally did this last digging in Virginia at Coles Hill. Him and Scott Gary, I got to give them props. They moved so much dirt. And he got a really nice food jar out of there, and then Scott wound up with a pretty little inkwell out of there.
Yeah, I believe I've seen those.
And
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, you've seen them pictures of DIV on the Facebook and stuff, but it is so hard to dig a pit or anything like that. I mean, it is a lot of work.
It really is. And that's where I think it's so important to have conversations like these and have videos and pictures and discussions, because if you can impart some knowledge, you can literally save somebody, 2 hours worth of digging, because there have been a number of times. I'm thinking in particular of the Rat Tree Farm that we dug at DIV, 38, maybe.
Trying to remember. Sounds right.
Anyway,
39.
Yes, one of those. And there was some gentlemen that they had the gusto, man. They had the right attitude, and they were positive. But just looking at the soil, I just looked at it like, man, what are you guys seeing? Because I just couldn't see what they were digging for. Turns out there was, in that particular soil, there was, and I can't explain it. Bill Mikulik could explain it better than I can, but there are secretions in that soil as just part of the rocks and part of the dirt in there that are black. And of course, black is what we're looking for in trash pits and fire pits. and huts.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have black, that is just part of the soil. And anywhere you dig, there's black. Well, now you're in a really rough situation because you don't know what to look for, So you had to really change methodologies in that soil because you couldn't just say, well, there's black and it's ash. You had to say, okay, is this ash or is this rocks that are metamorphosizing, or whatever the right word is there, changing over time and causing it to be black?
Interesting, I tell you.
That's right. When I first started digging at a pit in Virginia, I was running into that rock, and it looked just like ash. But on the other hand, you could take ash and then smear it in your fingers, and then on the other hand, the rock, you really can't. You can tell it's a piece of rock.
Right.
So.
Right.
But it's hard to tell the difference.
It really is. It really is.
Well, let me ask you a question, Tony. How do you go about finding a hut or a pit? Is it all metal detector, or do you probe, or is it a combination of the two?
For me, it's metal detecting. In my opinion, the best probe that I can use to find a Civil War trash pit is on the end of my metal detector. It's that coil, and that's what has gotten me into, I guess, probably a couple hundred pits over my digging, time, maybe more than that. I don't know, but I've tried probing, and I'm sure that I could learn it. Probing for pits is probably one of the better ways, because you're going to get pits that nobody else was able to hear. But it's also one of the hardest to learn. With metal detecting, particularly in an area that has not been hunted too awfully hard, metal detecting is by far and away the best way to find trash pits and huts. That's my experience.
Yeah, and Jeff, you may have to help me on this, but it was on the Glebe farm, and there was those huts lined up, and up above, I believe, where you were digging, there was a guy that all he was doing was probing in a line, and after 4, 5, 6 huts were found, you could see that original line of huts where they were. Do you find that the case, that they're generally lined up, or are they in a square, or are they just haphazardly put out, or what's the deal on that?
I feel like I've never been able to create a row of huts. I know that they exist because you can see it in every picture that's out there. The difficulty is you have to have at least 3 to make a row. And even when you do that, if you look at, and I wish there was a way we could do it right now, but if you look at some of the photographs of the winter camps, particularly in Culpeper, you'll notice lines of huts going, let's say, down the hill, right? So you have a line of huts with the chimneys at the back of the huts and the street in front of the hut. Well, behind them, you've got another line of huts. So the huts are basically back to back, and then there's a street on the other side. So you have street, line of huts, street, and then another 2 lines of huts, and so on. So if you have 3 huts lined up together, if they're exactly the same distance apart, 3 of them together exactly the same distance, you're probably in a line, and you've not crossed a street. However, if you have 2 huts that are, we're going to say, 10 feet apart, let's say that the fireboxes are, back to back of each other, they're 10 feet apart, and then you dig those all the way out, or maybe there's a couple guys digging each of those out, and then 30 feet away you've got another hut. Well, that you might be across the street, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I see what you're saying there. And Jeff put a link in the chat. What link is that, Jeff?
Well, I just went to Civil War hut sites and then, winter camps. And then, of course, I pulled, I've got a couple of pictures I put in there. So
showing the layout of a camp. Then that's what you're doing there,
right?
Yeah. What he's talking about. Yeah, that's interesting that you have, you have those huts back to back, and then there'll be a street in front of each one. And I guess it depends on how many guys were there as to how many huts that they would have and how the layout would be, You wouldn't think that they would just run in one long line. It would kind of be like a small city, wouldn't it?
It would. That's exactly right. And generally, the reason I say generally is because I don't think there's ever two camps that are exactly the same, but generally the officers are going to be at the top of the hill, particularly if it's a Union camp. So you'd have, officers spread out maybe across a ridge, and then you have the rest of the camp flowing down the hill, usually by company. That's been my experience.
And me and Jeff are just going to bounce questions back and forth, and I don't want to ask all of them. What have you got, Jeff?
Well, I'm going to reply to Swansea's comment. He said, I didn't realize Jeff was old enough to take those pictures. I got them from 7. So, I mean.
Y'all got me at a disadvantage because I'm not going to any of the. I've got everything in the studio working right now, and I'm not going to tempt fate. I'm just going to let everything go. I'll look at them later. But I do have those books that, I don't know who put those books out, how to locate Civil War camps and everything. And it's got several pictures, that book does, of how those camps were lined up and how the huts were and everything. And the officers being on the hill would be because of drainage and everything. They would have the best vantage point. They would have the best drainage. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That would make that kind of went along with their position and their title and the respect that they got. They could be in a more prestigious place. On the other hand, of course, they got a lot more wind, during the winter. So they had to make good and sure that their huts were pretty, relatively airtight because they're getting a lot of wind on those hills. Of course, everybody got a lot of that. But I'll tell you what, when you're out, I was relic hunting a similar camp to what we were talking about this past winter. And we got out there, and I want to say it was 28 or 29 degrees, but the wind was like 15, 20 mile an hour sustained. And I was like, oh my goodness, these poor guys had to put up with this all winter long. And man, that really put a new perspective on things.
And I guess it shows you
why. I bet it did.
It shows you why there's stuff in the hut, because during the cold times and the rain and the snow and the wind, they're going to spend a lot of time in the hut, aren't they? Oh,
absolutely. And that's, they did get bored out there. That's one of the reasons, and it's a blessing for us because we're reaping the benefits 153 years later. Well, let's see, 1864, 154 years later, because they were in there whittling on bullets and drinking. Like those guys, all they did was drink and eat, I guess, and drill, because that's what you find in there. You're finding bottles, uniform pieces, and that's another thing that occasionally happens too, though, is sometimes you don't find much of anything, and you're like, why did they even dig this pit to put one barrel band in it? That's going to happen. And that's another thing. That's a whole other side of pit digging that I had to really take into account when I first started, because I had a run of several pits that just didn't produce much. And what I finally realized is I had to look at the trash pit or the hut itself as the relic. That is the relic. And just the fact that I'm sitting down 2 or 3 feet down in the ground, going after this with my digging knife, that's good enough. I don't need anything else out of that hole. And when I finally started having that attitude and just being thankful to God for the opportunity to dig a trash pit out, things became easier, and I actually started finding more relics.
That's a good perspective. Just to be able to relive what was going on in most of those 1864, I guess, weren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. 63, 64. But you know what, though? That So you're asking if huts were more of a 63 to 64 phenomenon? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, actually, they were very prevalent throughout the war. I mean, it really they're everywhere where soldiers spent more than a couple months. To talk about huts in particular, living quarters, yeah, we're probably talking winter camps. But those would have been very prevalent, 61, 62, 62 to 63, 63, 64. But probably the best part of pit digging in general are the trash pits. And that was anywhere that a soldier or regiment would have been camped for even more than a couple weeks. I'm trying to think of a good example. Here's a great example. East of Richmond, McClellan got boxed up in the peninsula. 110,000 troops, I think it was, 1862. The Army got completely re-outfitted from being supplied by ships from the river, from the James River, while they were there. And man, you want to talk about 1 or 2 months worth of occupation producing a lot of trash pits. It's phenomenal. It's just amazing.
And it takes a lot of research, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. You have to, some of these places are well known, so those not as much research just because the digging community, everybody sort of knows where it should be. But then, there's some other places where you'll be going along and you get that deep target and you're down 18, 20 inches and finally see ash and glass in the bottom. And you're like, well, I didn't even know there was anything dug in here. And a good example, we knew there was camps in the area, but the first time we hunted, what was the name of that farm? Up 29, Spillman's farm. We were right behind the farm manager's house, and it was probably an early 1900s home. But we're digging amongst barns and fences and concrete feeding areas where the cows were feeding, and electric fences and telephone lines, and just not really a place you would expect. But somebody got in that area, started digging buttons. They called a friend of mine who I was hunting with and said, hey, you need to come over here. So we went over. We're not going to refuse a good time.
No.
And we got there, and it was on. I've never seen so many relics come out of such a small area in my life. And that was dug in. Nobody knew it was. They didn't even know there was a camp there. And it turns out there was an additional camp about 150 yards away. Did either of y'all hunt Spillman?
I didn't. No, the only two.
Yes, I did. Yes.
The only two that I've hunted was the Glebe Farm and then the DIV 40. I don't know what farm that was, where it had the Ohio camp and the Vermont camp there. Those are the only two that I've hunted. Oh, right.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
And there wasn't any pits on those, were they?
There was you're talking about. Let's see. The 40 was the one where the guy from Georgia found that ID tag. Oh shoot! Big, huge open farm, and they had the people up in the woods hunting that New York camp. Is that the one you're talking about?
Right.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's 40. Yeah.
That one did have some trash pits in that New York camp because was Jim Spiels got into one. I think it had 18 or 20 bullets in it, so a bunch of cow bones, but it wasn't that deep. And the reason I think is because the the hillside was really, really rocky. I mean, you couldn't swing a shovel without hitting a rock.
Yeah.
So in those cases, you might not see the big, 8 by 10 foot or 12 by 12 foot hut sites, dug down 2 or 3 feet in the ground. What you may see more there is little small trash pits with relics in them.
That's what we dug, wasn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, we got into a little trash pit on the New York camp then, and then I found that tip to a pin. What was that called, Lloyd?
A nib. was what it was.
Yeah,
nip,
nip.
yeah.
And then
Oh, that's
that
awesome.
was where I found my first bullet, was in a trash pit. So,
And we found a
I
couple
mean,
of buttons.
It wasn't very deep, but I mean, it was
If it's
a
all right.
pretty good size area. So,
Chris has a question here. If it's all right, I'll respond to that.
Sure.
If it's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
yeah.
I've dug bullets maybe 14 inches deep and hit fire-pocked rock, red rock, dark dirt. Did I mess up by not digging that hole out a whole lot bigger? Several of these in Missouri, just digging bullets, a couple of big. Yeah, you probably screwed up there.
Go back, Chris.
No, I don't. Here's the great thing, though. What I would do, Chris, I'm kind of joking by saying you screwed up. You didn't screw up because you dug relics out. But here's the deal: if you're positive that you hit ashes, that's one thing. That you do need to open up. There you go. That's the right attitude. Go on back.
Yeah, I'm going back. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would do if I were you in that situation, I would go back and when you get a deep signal like that and you've got some dark colored dirt in there or what you think is ash, usually the holes we're digging just for surface hunting are about 12 inches around, maybe 18. I would go ahead and make it a 2-foot round hole and 2 feet deep. And that will tell you the story pretty quickly. One key is this: if you're past about 14 inches and you have odd color soil that you know is not indigenous soil, and when I say indigenous, I mean it's not the original soil that's been there for 1,000 years. Here's a good example. And Chris, if you can answer this with your chat, do so. Do you have, let's say you have red soil, like, I don't know, I think you said you're in Missouri. If you have red soil and that's your undersoil, that's not your plow zone, but I'm talking 14 inches plus. If you have red soil there and you're at 16 inches and you've got, instead of red this time, now you've got brown, you've got what looks like ashes. And particularly if you see, a piece of glass roll out, well, that's you got to open that up.
What you're saying
that's what I would do.
What you're saying is you're looking for any anomaly that doesn't fit with the general area, the soil color, soil density, or any of those kind of things.
Generally, that's true. Density, I don't put as much stock in myself because I've been around people that were probing, and I've done it too, where I was trying to use a metal probe, in the ground, and I thought I felt soft dirt, but there was just nothing there. It was mostly my inexperience, but what I found is the number one indicator is when you have, well, obviously metal, but in the absence of metal and in the absence of glass, you need to have a mottled soil, particularly with ash in it. That's probably the best giveaway. And you know what? Usually it's not real hard to know when you're in one, particularly if it's a trash pit. Just because with trash pits, they're pretty obvious. Like they had a good amount of fire in there for a while. There's a good number of relics in there of some kind or another.
Yeah. I tell you what.
We had Matt Howe. Of course, he was talking about like if you're digging a signal and you have a piece of iron below plow level, well, that piece of iron got there for a reason. So the best thing to do is to investigate.
Absolutely. You have to do that. And there's going to be times where you're occasionally going to dig a piece of iron that is not from the Civil War. A good example is we were hunting the Fair Oaks farm at DIV, and I got an awesome, long low tone, and I just like, oh my goodness, this sounds so good. And I thought it was going to be a shell because there were shells found all over that farm. And it turned out it was a 2-foot round roll of barbed wire from the 1920s or 30s, buried at about 4 feet deep, which that was kind of discouraging right at first, and it make you mad for about 10 seconds until you realize that, hey, it's okay, because if that had been a Civil War pit, I'm hearing the right signals.
That's right.
That's definitely what to look for.
Hey, guys, we're coming up on a hard break. I'm going to go ahead. I know that Barb has put the call-in number in. Those of you that want to call in and ask Tony some questions, get ready to do that. But first, we're going to go to a commercial break. If your passion is metal detecting, then you know how much your success is based on the equipment you use. Let my buddy Tim Henderson of Murray Branch Outdoors in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, help you with that. Tim is an authorized dealer of Garrett, XP Deus, Tesoro, and Macro detectors and supplies, and he is now an authorized dealer for MineLab. So, if you're looking to get your hands on the new Equinox 600 or 800, then Tim is your guy. Murray Branch Outdoors is not only competitive in their prices, but the service after the sale is second to none. Tim not only sells detectors, he uses them, and so he can answer any questions you might have. Murray Branch Outdoors also deals in used detectors, and he'll take your old detector in on trade when you decide to upgrade. So give Tim of Murray Branch Outdoors a call at 615-948-4611, and be sure and tell him Relics Radio sent you. And I talked to Tim Henderson this afternoon, and he got some Equinox 600s in today. I think he's got about a half dozen of those. So if you're in the market for an Equinox 600, go ahead and give Tim a call, and I'll have Tim go ahead and put his number in the chat. And our number here is 270-495-0315. If you've got a question for Tony that you want to ask, well, just jump right in there. Don't be bashful.
Tony, I had a question. Do you dig many like privys or anything? Have you tried that?
Not yet. I did have a chance to dig like a 1930s privy. Let's see. You know what? We did dig some in Petersburg. Bob Buttafuso called me one time, and he got me over to Petersburg with some friends. It was the craziest thing. They were using 1830s tax maps. And on the tax map from 1830, let's say 32, for instance, it would show exact measurements from the street, and it would, show the buildings exactly where they were, and it would actually show the outhouses. So a friend of mine that owns a business downtown, he somehow got permission to literally take a jackhammer on the end of a backhoe, and they were measuring off of corners of buildings, triangulating where these privies should have been, take the jackhammer, bust through the concrete parking lot, and dig down 6 feet. And sure enough, there was a privy every time. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. But that's my privy digging experience.
Man. Of course, I've been trying to locate a privy on, of course, the house was built in 1839. And
nice.
I've been trying to locate the privy on it, and it's been a chore trying to locate it. So
I bet.
I mean,
I've
never dug a privy, so I mean, I really don't know what to look for. So,
and some people may not know, Tony. Talk about your equipment, your detectors, and what have you. What you use to get into a hut or a pit.
I started out. Actually, it was 10 years ago. This April was when I started digging, and I had an MXT then. I don't recall. I may have gotten into one pit with the MXT. If I did, it wasn't many, maybe just one or two. After that, I got a White's TDI, which was really popular at DIV for a while. Got into a couple of pits there. Later on, got a AT Pro for digging here around home, which is more sweet ground here around Powhatan, Virginia, unlike the hot soil and Culpeper. And then, of course, we all sort of know about the GPX movement a few years ago, and I've got one of those. I've got a GPX 4800, and for years I've used a 18-inch double D Commander coil, which got a lot of good depth. And then just recently, I guess it was April 6th, I bought a 15-inch D-Tech Super Spiral double D coil, and that, according to some people, and I tend to believe these people, it gets better depth than the 18-inch. It's a smaller coil, and just seems to do really good. And in the business of finding pits, even just an extra inch of depth makes all the difference.
Yeah. Hey, we got Chris Hamsoff on the line. You were talking to him in chat there a while ago. Go ahead, Chris.
Good.
Hey, Tony, it's nice to talk to you, man. I sure been looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Good talking to you, Chris.
Out here, we've got just really rich black farm soil and real deep prairie soils. That's what I'd like to get the guys. I've been talking with a couple fellows here. I'd like to get them up. One of them has a GPX, and he seems to do pretty well with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you so what kind of camps are you hunting?
These are 1861, 1862 winter. The diaries talk about the incredible amounts of mud.
Wow, that's good.
I've never heard of anyone digging camps here in Missouri, or digging huts here in Missouri.
Well, then if that's the case, you're sitting on a gold mine, honestly. So you're saying that they were for sure wintered there, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. We're talking regimental size camps, is that correct?
Yes. 6,000 men.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You're in it.
They've been pounded hard.
I'm going to guess. Yeah. That was my next question. I was going to say, I'm guessing that it's been hunted pretty good. That's actually a good thing, believe it or not, because a lot of the easy surface targets and surface trash will be gone. So the signals that you do hear, particularly if you're using a GPX, or I'm just going to say a GPX because right now that's probably the premier machine for hearing really deep targets like this. The targets that you do hear with that kind of machine are more likely going to be the deeper targets that no one ever heard before. And so essentially you don't have to worry about hearing all the little tiny targets up high. You're going to hear the bigger, deeper targets. And those are that's what pits are going to be. So, you know.
Do you have any suggestions on if there's 4 of us, but only Jeff Ford has the GPX? Should we just have him flag the signals and then tie him up and throw him in the back of the truck and take these? How should we go about doing that?
Tie him up.
It seems logical to me. I would try it and see how that goes. But Jeff's a big guy, so bring it, follow around him with the shovel and hit him on the head.
You're going to have to get on top of the truck to even hit him on the head.
Yeah. Put him in one of the bear traps. One of the bear traps should hold him.
Yeah, that'll work. Or just bury him in the first hole you dig.
I think all of us need to come out to Missouri and bring our GPXs and just help you guys out. What do you say, Jeff?
I like the way that sounds.
Hey, that sounds like a good idea.
I've got hunted out sites for you that we can get on that have only bullet things we find out there are bullets at 12 inches deep, and that's it anymore.
Well, Tony.
Well, hey, we need to bring the GPXs up there.
Tony brings up a good point, though, because I'm right on this, ain't I, Tony, that you're looking for a winter camp because that's where they would dig in. They wouldn't dig in on summer camp. And, you're looking at a spot where...
They might some, actually. Generally, winter camps are going to be longer because they were there for so long. Now, summer camp, you will have some small fire pits and some trash pits, and you'll definitely have latrines. That's one thing we haven't touched on much yet is latrines. But in the case of the McClellan camp east of Richmond that we mentioned earlier, I could be mistaken, and I don't remember for sure, but I want to say that was summer. I think it was July. And even in that case, we're talking pits 5 feet. The last one I dug there was a couple months ago, 5 feet long, 3 feet deep, 3 feet wide. And there are some that were much bigger than that. So it's not just about the huts and staying there for a winter. It really is about any amount of occupation and just having too much stuff to just leave on top of the ground.
Well, go ahead.
That's right. And then, of course, here in where I'm at in Middle Tennessee, of course, I had a couple of garrison camps here close to the house, and they really never had to dig in. I mean, of course, it was always warm here. So, I mean, that's the bad thing about huts. But now we had plenty of trash pits, and then that's the thing I'm trying to get into now is like digging the trash pits out of the farms. Because I know there's still plenty of relics left that you could find, but it's going to be deep.
Well, the one thing, and I don't know if Chris is still on the line or not, but
he is.
What he's talking about. Okay, good. What he's talking about in Missouri with a winter encampment there, and he specifically mentioned all the mud. That is a big deal because you've got, and maybe not even so much from a hut or pit digging perspective, just in general with relics, you've got that much mud and guys slogging through the mud. Then you've got tons of erosion and wash. It's going to be, they're out there, during the night sleeping, and it's pouring down rain, and you're getting nothing but erosion for months. And so you might have rivulets of mud washing down the hillside, and between the winter encampment, which lasted probably 3 to 6 months, followed by multiple years, most likely after that, not being farmed, you're talking about lots of erosion, sometimes 2 to 3 feet of erosion in one area at the bottom of a hill. So you might have big pockets of relics in tiny little rivulets that are now covered up with 1.5 feet of dirt. And actually, Matt just said it right there, a super long low tone. So if you have, let's say you've got a U.S. Belt buckle at 18 to 20 inches, a lot of, I'm not going to say that every VLF detector would miss that, but a lot of them would miss it. That's really deep. But that GPX is going to hammer down on that tone. I'm telling you it will. That to me, that excites me, and I'm not even out in Missouri.
Well, come on out.
It excites me. I'll
get off and let somebody else pop on here, but we'll talk about getting you guys out here then.
Hey, sounds good,
awesome,
Chris.
Man.
Yeah.
Sounds good, Chris.
Sound like a fall plan to me.
There you go.
It does. All right. Nice talking with you, Tony. Thank you.
Hey, good call, Chris.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris.
Tony, go ahead and talk a little bit more about latrines. I don't know that we've got all the information that we'd like to have on that. And by the way, if you've got a question for Tony, our number is 270-495-0315. Go ahead and call. We're a ways away from closing this show down. I can tell you that right now.
Good deal. Yeah, latrines, that's what we call them. A lot of times the soldiers called them sinks. Recently, somebody had put a post up on one of the digging sites, and they had photos, really cool photos of latrines that, believe it or not, were in front of the entrenchments that they were occupying. I don't quite understand how that worked, but I guess it doesn't make sense to me. To me, if you'd have a latrine, a bathroom for all intents and purposes, you'd want it way behind the lines. But anyway, be that as it may. So the few that I've dug out, there was one that I feel confident was a latrine. That was the one where the 750 bullets came out of one hole in the crate. That was, I want to say it was 36 inches down to the bullets. So it was probably another 6 inches beyond that to the floor of the latrine. That one, I think, was 5 or 6 feet long and about 2.5 feet wide. So we're basically talking about a slit trench, and they're obviously putting, human waste in there. And along with human waste, they're putting bottles. Don't ask me why, but this particular camp, we're talking Wisconsin Hill, they threw basically an entire case of 3-ring mini balls in there. I don't know why they did, some of the things they did, but I'm sure glad they did. Uniforms. There was one pit that was dug up on Coles Hill. I still think is a latrine because of the way they layered it. And there was a couple of pristine belt buckles in there. One was a SNY. Soldiers typically didn't just toss those. I mean, I think a lot of times they were lost, or maybe if they were damaged, they were thrown away. But there was 2 really nice ones in that hole. And my thought, you never really know what happens, but my thought is they're in there doing what they're there to do, and with their belt loosened, maybe it just slid out of their pants, and they're certainly not going to go after it now. So I don't know.
I don't think that I would either. I'd put in a requisition for a new belt buckle myself.
Exactly. Yep. But one thing in particular about latrines that in the few that I have dug is that they do seem to be layered. Once you get into the bottom of them and you're sitting on the floor of it, let's say 3 feet, and you look at the sidewall of the undug portion, a lot of times you can see, it might not be real obvious, but you can kind of see a layering, almost like a lasagna. That's maybe not a good example, but you can see sort of layers of dirt. You might have, real bright red that looks like indigenous soil, then there'll be a layer of brown, and then above that more bright red, and then brown again. And that's just simply, they did that to keep the smell down. They were just layering dirt on top.
Yeah, dig it down and then use it for a while, and then put some dirt on top of it and use it for a while, and then eventually probably move, I guess.
Yeah, and they would just keep digging multiple latrines, and that's something to remember too. I mean, you're talking, if it's a regimental camp, you're talking, I think it was in excess of 800 guys in a regiment. That's a lot of folks, and that latrine's going to be used pretty much, all day, every day. So there's a really good chance those can be even more lucrative than trash pits. The one that we got into at Rat Tree, what was his name? Mike Weaver had gotten into a nice little trash pit down in the bottom of the was it the Second Rhode? What was the regiment that Elisha Hunt Rhodes was in? Wasn't that Second Rhode Island? Anybody remember?
I don't know.
All for the Union. Let me pull up. I'm sure somebody's going to say it here in chat. 1 second.
I'll tell you what. While you're doing that, hold that thought, and we've got one more commercial break here real quick.
Sounds good.
If you want to keep up with what's going on in the metal detecting world, then you need to be a subscriber to American Digger magazine. Butch and Anita Holcomb are the publishers of the magazine and have won awards for 3 straight years for being the best digger magazine on the market. American Digger magazine is available in both print and digital formats, so no matter where you live in the world, you can enjoy the latest happenings in the hobby. You can get in touch with American Digger magazine by going to americandigger.com or give them a call at 770-362-8671 and be sure and tell them that you heard it on Relics Radio. And by the way, guys, the name of that tune is Wide Pride Blues in honor of Butch Holcomb and Heath Jones.
Wide Pride Blues.
Wide Pride Blues. That's what it is. I like to get that in there every chance that I get. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, just talking about latrines. So I did a quick Google search while we're sitting here talking, but those of you that have not read the book All for the Union by Elisha Hunt Rhodes, you really ought to get it and read it. He started out as a private in the 2nd Rhode Island Infantry, and he wound up as the adjutant general, he was colonel. He wound up as a colonel. Anyway, that was the camp that we hunted, one of the camps that we hunted at the rat tree or glebe farm at DIV. Seven, if you remember where the silo was at that farm?
Yeah, up on the hill.
And if you look, exactly, you looked off to the north, and down in that bottom and up sort of sweeping up to the left, that was the 2nd Rhode Island infantry camp. And he actually talks about that camp, and he talks about the soldiers helped him build his hut. He was quartered with Surgeon Carr, C-A-R-R, that was the surgeon's last name. And then Jimmy Spalding, who's from Kentucky, he was digging there and found a soldier's ID tag stuck in the sidewall of a hut. And it was, I want to say it was like Company K, and I don't remember the soldier's name, but it was a 2nd Rhode Island infantry, which is good enough for me to go ahead and call that camp the 2nd Rhode Island Infantry Camp, which to me was just amazing, especially having listened to or read All for the Union. But that was the camp we found the latrine in, the very bottom end of it. And that was just so cool. We found 2 latrines there. The first one we got into wound up having 20 whole bottles in it, and the second one I think had 2 or 3.
Man, what DIV was it on Coles Hill where the found latrine?
11 is where they first got into it, and the bottles really started to roll out. I mean, it was, but I want to say it was middle or late part of the second day when they were, I'm not sure. They didn't find it right away at DIV 11. But then,
yeah, it was later in the hunt, and then of course everybody just had to hurry to dig what they could dig.
Right.
Hey guys,
and then they reopened it.
Mm-hmm. We got another call. Barb is on the line. What's going on, Barb?
Well, hello, Barb.
Some of my favorite people.
How's it going, Barbara?
You're our favorite people too.
I want to talk to Tony about the 15-inch D-Tech coil.
Yes. Yeah, it's I've been pretty satisfied with it so far, but I'll tell you right now, unless you've got shoulders like Hercules, I would definitely invest in one of the weight distribution vests from Mind Lab, or maybe somebody's got an aftermarket version. It is a very, very heavy coil.
Okay. That's it.
Yeah.
It's
called
I was more interested.
Pro Swing.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Barb.
The price is just, I've seen other, coils that were lighter, but the price on this one is pretty good.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to remember what I paid for mine. It was in the $400 ballpark. But I think it's a good trade-off. I don't know if this is any real indication of its performance, but for me, that I literally bought it the first morning of the last DIV at Coles Hill, and my third signal was a sword drag at about 18 to 20 inches, along with some other relics, and that was a pit, and that gave up a bottle, a belt buckle, and a medicine bottle. So I'm sold on it.
And I'll tell you, Barb, what I've done on my large coil I've got the 12x15, and it's not all that heavy, but it gets that way if you use it all day. I use my harness that came with my GPX that you put your battery in, because my battery is mounted on the side. And then I've got a bungee cord that I just run to my GPX and just hook it on that harness, and it really does help. I mean, it holds the weight of the mainly of the coil up off the ground, a little bit, helps you out. So you could do that as a last resort. Even if you wear your battery on the back of it, you could still run your bungee cord down off the front.
I think that, to me, that's almost smarter than getting the vest in some ways, because you don't have to invest any money into it. And basically, I mean, if all you really need, like he said, is a bungee cord, I think that's a great idea.
Well, the 4500 came with a bungee cord, so you've already got what you need.
It did.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then there you go.
Yeah, you've got everything that you need.
Yeah.
I got the MindLab Pro swing. And of course, it's got the little plastic attachment that goes on your side, and then of course it's got the bungee cord. It helps out a lot. And then, of course, I still have a little back problems with that. And then I wear my backpack, and of course it's got I keep at least 3 liters of water every time I go hunting, and that helps me kind of balance out.
Mhm. Nice.
Okay.
That's good
well,
stuff.
I just wanted to call in and say hi. I love Tony. He's a great guy. I love seeing the pits dug at Glebe when Glenn dug that teapot. That was like killer.
That was phenomenal.
It was an amazing find, no doubt about it. And that was in that roll that I was talking about. What would it be? East of the silo there, up in that little draw that went up the hill, wasn't it?
Yeah. In fact, I'm still looking back. I've done some looking at that hillside. I'm still not so sure that where he got that teapot, that may actually have been officers' quarters up along that ridge. I can't swear to it. I don't know for sure. I think you'd actually have to dig something specific to a soldier with a name on it to know for sure. But they were either really big trash pits. I don't know. I still think they might have been huts up there. Really big huts.
I agree. As soon as I seen that, I said, that's officer. Some officer had, and somehow it got left behind.
Exactly. I feel the same way.
And Barb, Tim Henderson put in, he is a detect dealer, so you might give him a shout and see what kind of deal that you can get on that coil. He's also a MindLab dealer, and if Jeff Ford will put in what coil that he's got, I've been impressed with it. It's an elliptical commander coil, and it did a great job whenever he came down and hunted with us. I think he found some bullets that we wouldn't have found with our coils.
Yeah, we were just using the 11-inch, and then of course Jeff Ford, he come behind us, and then he done real good.
And I see Matt.
And you know,
go ahead, Tony.
Talking about the coil sizes, I tell you what probably makes more difference, really, to be perfectly honest, than the coil size, is making sure you can get that thing, not only set it on the ground, but sometimes you got to push the ground, particularly if you're in a cornfield or a bean field, and especially in a pasture that's not eaten down all the way to the dirt. You really got to push, because even a half inch or an inch of difference in depth will make all the difference in being able to hear or not hear a hut.
And Jeff put in the chat that that's a 12 by 15 Commander. It is a double D. That brings up one more question that I want to ask you real quick. Have you ever used any mono GPX coils, and what's your thoughts on the mono coil?
I have not. I think it would be worth trying because I have heard rumors, nothing solid, but I have heard rumors that in certain very sweet or non-mineralized ground, that monocoils get phenomenal depth. I'm talking like way crazy depth. But most of the ground that I dig is not that way. It's something that needs to be investigated. I'll put it that way.
That's what I had heard, is that you don't get the coverage with a monocoil because everything comes out the bottom or the center of the coil, but you do get more depth if you've got good soil. Now, if you've got mineralized soil, it don't handle it as well as a double D. But that's a thought anyway.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, Lloyd, don't you have the monocoil?
I've got an 11-inch monocoil. Yeah, I never have used it, and you don't get the iron discrimination with monocoil that you can get with a double D, and that's another problem. But hey, Barb, give Tim a call and see what he can do for you there on one of those coils. What kind of price that you can get on one of those?
We've already hooked up, and Tony, I love you. Great speaker. Glad you had him on. I was like rushing through the house trying to get everything done so I could get here at 8 o'clock.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I love hearing your voice again, and I guess before long we'll see each other at DIV again. It'll be here before you know it.
Oh, God, I can't wait. I love going. It is the best family, the best friends. Everybody's great. And I agree. You got to, what was the one we went to? It was where the skirmish was. It wasn't
Right. Mm-hmm.
I found all those bullets in that one spot, but it was because I was going slow. I was hugging trees, and
nice.
You just never know where you're going to find stuff.
I tell you what, you're hardcore. I got to hand it to you. I know whenever I see Barb out there, she's gonna be nailing it. She's just so good with the detector.
Don't try to stop her in the woods and talk to her. Wait till the hunt's over with. Wait till it gets dark because she's all business.
I have a 80% hearing loss on one side, so when Tony was giving his class going, it goes woo and used the pole cord, whatever he had, showing how the sound goes. I'm like, Tony, that makes no sense to me because I don't hear that.
Oh, that's funny.
And so what I do with my hearing loss, and this might be good for other people, is I was not finding anything at that skirmish. And one of the guys said, Barb, these are all over the place. And I said, let me just swing it. And I swung it. I said, I got it. And I walked 2 feet away from him, and I went, I got one. It's the same sound.
Oh,
but it
I know
doesn't...
you're talking about in the woods in the New York camp, right?
No, this was, which DIV? It was the new place we'd never been. It wasn't a camp. It was where the Yanks were down on the other side of the river firing up at the Confederates up in the woods. Where?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Pharaohs. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Pharaohs, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I was just having a hard time, and I think it's because the soil is different. And I found some great finds once I could swing over someone else's. I'm like, oh, I got that. And found five of the shot, like bam, 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 bam.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, but I love hunting with you, and yes, I'm hardcore. I may be old, but get out of my way. I'm coming with my detector.
That's awesome.
Hey, great call, Barb. We appreciate you calling in and talking to Tony, and look forward to seeing you again at DIV soon.
All right, I'll see y'all hopefully this fall.
Okay.
All right, see you.
Matt's talking about several things, pits and things like that. Go ahead and give us a call, Matt, and talk with Tony, and y'all discuss that where everybody can hear it. Not everybody's on the chat. We may have some listeners that are not on the chat, so call us at 270-495-0315. Jeff put it in the chat there. I'm sure that you guys
I beat Barb that time.
Do what?
Barb normally, I beat Barb that time. She normally puts the telephone number in, and then I beat her that time. So.
We appreciate Barb. She's one of our moderators and helps us out quite a bit all the time. And she got to be with us on our live show at the last DIV, so that was great. And we do have Matt calling in. Let me get him hooked up. What's going on, Matt?
How are you gentlemen doing?
Well, hello, Matt.
Hey,
what's going on?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
Doing well. I'm at work, so you have to excuse any radio noise or funny things like that, but I'll talk as long as I can.
I know how that is.
So. Oh, yeah.
It must be nice to have a job where you can listen to a podcast and call in on a podcast while you're at work. Man, you can't beat that.
I'll tell the other side of that. The other side is he's liable to be in the back of an ambulance flying to the hospital about 1:00 tomorrow morning and get thrown up on. So that's
I seen the hailstorm that you went through today. You put it on Facebook. I seen that It was a pretty bad storm.
Yeah, it was a considerable storm. I mean, we had some pretty sizable stuff, a little bigger than a dime. But it was pretty neat. But yeah, it's great to talk to Tony. Talk to you guys again. You know, talking about pits. I'm kind of like Tony now. Once I've dug a pit now, I have no desire to do anything else.
Yeah, that's for sure. See, I used to be the other way too. I tell you, and Matt, maybe you were this way too. When I first started, I remember before DIV 13 and 14, I didn't really care a lot about it because one or two of the pits that I did get into didn't have much in it, or maybe I saw somebody dig a pit that, you know, they got one button out or something like that. And I thought, well, I can do better than that, you know, surface hunting. But what I was missing really was the glass. And especially when you dig your first piece of glass, after that, it's almost impossible not to get addicted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I guess it was 37. Me and Jamie and Ross Walker had the privilege of hunting with Dennis, and I hate to butcher his last name, but he works for James Madison's Montpelier, and really learned Bjorkman. Really learned a lot from him, and he put us into our first pit that produced any glass. And after that, it was just a phenomenal hunt, you know.
That's awesome.
That was good. I guess, you know, I did see in the comments, somebody was talking about kind of the signals and what you look for. And, you know, Tony, I don't know what you look for, but after, I know you guys have seen probably the last video I posted of, I'm hunting a very deep old line in the middle of a field, and I found I think I've gotten total this spring we've gotten 4 bayonets out of it, some ramrods, and probably about 150 bullets.
Wow. Man.
But what I'm looking for, and I think this is what you look for, but I'm not real sure, maybe you can elaborate a little more on it, is I'm looking for this long, really kind of broken, almost unaudible tone.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. To me, I don't know that it will necessarily break a lot. It depends on how deep it is and how much iron content. The ones that I've dug, typically, I'm thinking in one in particular right now it was a complete. It was a barrel band, not like a rifle barrel band, but an actual barrel. A band that encircled a wooden barrel, and it was about, I'd say, 14 inches in diameter. And even though it was all iron, because it was so deep, the tone actually, for me, remained clean. Now, sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes it will break if it's shallow enough, because the GPX apparently has a better ability to discriminate and sort of break up iron if it's relatively shallow. But yeah, the prime word that you used was long, and it's kind of a hard thing to describe until you've heard a really good deep target. But it just, the duration of that tone, particularly a low tone, for some reason they seem to all be low tones for me, with a few exceptions, but the duration of the tone is just like, takes forever to swing over it, like 18 to 36 inches sometimes even longer.
Yeah, and I haven't had that personal experience with that length of a tone. I did dig a shell this spring that it seemed like maybe I had about a 12-inch signal. But that was a good, solid, smooth. It was just so low and so quiet that it just sounded the same in multiple different directions. And I thought to myself, I got to dig whatever this is. And after the first 12 inches of dirt, it was absolutely popping, and I knew it was a good target.
Wow, that is awesome. And see, right there is a perfect example. You know, I know this isn't a GPX show, but that really is kind of what we're talking about, because what he's saying, How deep was that shell, Matt?
My guess is 36 inches.
And see, right there, boom. I mean, you can have the best Nautilus, the best VLF in the world, and I just don't think you're ever going to hear that target, ever, unless you're going to use a GPX or maybe there's something new that's coming out that does just as good, as the GPX. But I think that's phenomenal.
And, some people listening to the show tonight that hadn't used a GPX, not familiar with it and everything, you two guys talk just a little bit about swing speed. How fast are you going in order to get a 12 or 18-inch signal?
The GPX in general, because it's pulse induction, you just have to swing slower. I probably swing a half or a third of the speed with a GPX, really less than that, but maybe a quarter of the speed with the GPX that I would swing with a VLF machine. It's just, it's basically the difference between driving a Cadillac and driving a bulldozer. You just slow way down. Now, you don't have to, take 10 seconds to make one swing, but you do need to go slow. That's my experience.
And I think that's something that everybody needs to understand whenever they hear you talking about these signals, that you're not swinging fast through a field to hear those.
No, never.
I think the same thing. What we're talking about is these signals that are really questionable of what we would be digging that we found work for us is really the case with VLF machines too. So if we took all these things that we apply to a GPX, you take and you apply it to a VLF machine, and all of a sudden you're digging targets that are outside of the range of what you would consider normal, because you go, hey, I wouldn't dig that until you knock 4 or 6 inches of dirt off, and then you go, oh, that's that repeatable target that I know.
Yeah.
I guess
another example is talking about VLF. Charles City County was digging just a wide open field with absolutely nothing in it, and got what sounded to me, it was definitely going to be iron, but kind of like you said, it was the tone sounded different in its duration, so like it was longer. And I thought, well, I guess there's a chance there's a pit here, and sure enough, there was 2 little tiny colonial trash pits within about 20 feet of each other, nothing else in them, but each of them had a grubbing hoe. That was it. And the only reason I dug it is because the duration of the signal was longer. I knew it was iron before it came out of the ground.
But it's back to that same thing of something different, something you wouldn't normally dig, but still paying attention to those signals. And I think and talking about swing speed, Jeff Ford at DIV 40 came up to me and was like, man, you haven't gone anywhere. And what we talked about earlier is don't leave relics to find relics. Last time I talked with you guys, and and if you're hunting slow and you're being methodical about it, you're not going to go anywhere. Some of the best DIVers I know, Mark Science, Dennis, those guys, you don't see them moving from a 10 by 10 or 20 by 20 area for 3 days. And then you see these cases that are absolutely loaded full of relics, and you're just absolutely blown away,
Yeah.
Chris Hansall, he had a question. Of course, for someone that's buying a GPX, how deep would you bury the items for a detecting guarding?
If it was me, I would, detecting garden, I would start out with a 3-ringer, because that's probably one of the more common relics. I'd bury one at 8 inches, 12 inches, and 18 inches, and listen to the differences on those. Trying to think what else. Nails.
I would add that you should lay one right on top of the ground.
Yes, good idea. That's a great idea.
Because you should. So and I don't know if you talked about it earlier, but there's a difference between an iron blank and an overload. And a couple of my bullets I found at some of the DIVs were 2-3 inches. Just laying on top of the ground, easy signals that you're like, how did anybody miss this? But
and I got
something about the signal being that close that sort of overwhelms the coil, I think.
And I got a good tip at the New York camp because there were so many rocks and everything, and those bullets were fairly shallow. And I had my iron reject turned up to 10, and a guy named Troy that I met, he came up and he told me, he said, what have you got your iron reject on? I said, 10. He said, turn it down to about 4 or 5, because he said, these bullets are blanking.
Yeah, that was the weird thing about that camp. There's only a very few places that I've ever seen ground that was that hot. The rest of that whole farm was sweet, best I could say. But that New York camp was hot as fire. And the there was a lot of people leaving relics just because there was every bullet in the whole place was blanking. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen.
And the VLF machines, especially the MXT that Earl from Virginia had, he had a great hunt. And that detector shined on the New York camp where GPX has really struggled in a way.
No kidding. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he had a great hunt with that MXT. And I think it was just because things were shallow and we were passing a lot of signals that were probably bullets that, were blanking on our machines.
We're blanking, yeah.
Yeah, first 2 days.
Yeah.
And that's the trouble with an organized hunt, that you have 3 days. A lot of times it takes you 2 days to figure out what's going on. And then, most of your 2/3 of your hunting time is gone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean,
that does happen.
You look at other hunts, I mean, that John and Roses put on. All right, say Brandy Rock, for example. Okay, everybody knows where the targets are there. I mean, they know where the camps are. It's laid out and everything. I mean, we could go back there and then do pretty good, I mean, with the bigger coils on the GPXs. As, say, a new farm, it's going to take everybody a while to learn where everything's at.
Right. I think that's the key. And the interesting thing to me about ongoing relic hunting in the future is that every time technology changes for the better, and one example for me is this 15-inch coil, it's going to give me some kind of an edge. That changes things. When we go back to Brandy Rock, and I hope to goodness we do, it's going to change things. We're going to be able to go back to the same areas, but now we'll have more knowledge, hopefully better equipment. And one other thing that I'm working on right now, and I hope this is the right time to mention this, I got to go soon, but I'm working on a project right now with a guy with a new technology, or not a new technology, but with a technology that has been really underutilized in our relic hunting world that has the potential to revolutionize pit digging in this area and really everywhere. And I'll have hopefully more information on that coming up within the next several months.
Well, when you do,
that sounds good.
You get back in touch with us, and we'll have a special show. We'll have an exclusive on that. What do you say?
I'd be happy to do that. And that's here's the way I look at it. Relic hunting, it obviously isn't getting easier. We just have to adapt to the changes. We're in 2018. We've got great people that hunted it really hard before us. So we're getting the leftovers, but the good part is that the leftovers now are really deep and they're really concentrated in these pits. And it's going to be, the better that technology gets, it's going to be really interesting, in the future. So
that sounds great. I mean, I'm looking forward to it.
Sure is.
Well, guys, I hate to do this. I didn't know where you were at in the show, but I can hear a 2-year-old downstairs that Mama needs some help with.
That's fine.
Is that going to work for you guys?
That's going to work for us. We'll continue on. We may take another call or two or whatever. Hey, Tony, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, your social media channels and what have you?
Absolutely. I'm going to type my name here in the chat. This is what you can look for on Facebook, and then Facebook or YouTube. Let's see here. Hang on. Let me type this in. YouTube.
And while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and make the comment. I knew that this was going to be a great show. I knew that you were going to be a great guest, and we were not disappointed, and a lot of people were really interested in hearing you tonight, and you certainly did not disappoint, did he, Jeff?
Well, that is a true blessing to hear you say that, and it's I'm very, very honored and to be on here and humbled and looking. I would love to do this again. To me, it's fun watching all these chat comments. I think that is so much fun watching that come in.
Oh, it is. I promise, it's our honor.
No doubt about it. It is our honor.
Y'all call anytime. I'd love to do it again.
Well, we're going to certainly take you up on it, and we'll let you go and let you take care of that 2-year-old. That's harder than digging a pit, I know.
I've got an 8-month-old, so, I mean.
Hey, Tony, thanks for being on with us tonight.
Thank you guys so much, and to all you guys out there in Relics Radio Land, a wonderful good night to you all.
We appreciate it.
Good night, Tony.
What a great guest. I tell you what, a wonderful guest. Don't you think, Matt?
Yeah, Tony's a fantastic guy. If you ever get to bump into him, he's a class act all the way. Whether it's in the field or just he's got a kind of infectious personality about him,
And you've been.
He does. I mean, he's a really great guy, and I mean he's been blessed, and then to where he lives, and then to find all the great relics he has, and then I mean, one guy that deserves it, he does. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Matt, you're no stranger to pits. I've been watching your progress, and like you say, the bayonets that you guys are digging here lately and everything. I've got a question for you. How do you, obviously you hear a signal, you take your big shovel, you begin digging, but once you see that you're in a pit, how do you negotiate that pit from that point on?
I think what I see, personally, I've seen from either a DIV, I see guys start with these little small holes. What I generally try to do is start with something a little bit larger, especially when I get down to the 12, 14, 10-inch mark, as opposed to reaching down in this basketball-sized hole, opening it out so you can start to see what the layers look like, so you have an idea of getting into whatever sort of feature you're in, and then just take it slow. It's sometimes it's tough on say like an organized hunt, but if you're able to get into a pit or a hut somewhere outside of an organized hunt, taking it slow, that the relics have been there for a number of years. Don't get so excited that you're going to get in there and maybe bust up a bottle or ding up a plate, but that's kind of how I start with it, is get an idea of where I think the relic is, open the hole up and slowly work down, but get into a spot where you can actually work towards it,
And once you get the big hole dug with your shovel, do you go to your lash then mainly?
Yeah, absolutely. Lash, pinpointer, and pretty much that's it. It's once you get the big hole open, all you have to do is just work with that. Occasionally, I'll use my GPX again or whatever machine I'm using. A lot of times, I'll actually use a VLF machine even in poor soil, because you can use a smaller coil. You can kind of tighten up your area you're looking in. So, that's kind of the basis, and work the walls with the lash tool. I'm sure Tony talked about it. My goal on any sort of thing that I think is a square or round feature is to go find a wall first. As soon as you can find a wall, you can start getting an idea of what you're in, whether it's colonial, whether it's Civil War, even say if it's 1890s privy that has, bottles and things like that in it.
And we asked Tony, I was a little bit surprised that Tony didn't use a probe all that much. I think I understood him right that 90% or more of his hut digs or pit digs are just detector related, a signal that he found. Do you guys use probes any? When
I go, I've gone a few times with Bruce Adwell from Virginia Diggers, and he's an excellent guy on a probe. But what I find is that probes for me are more of areas that I'm checking depressions or rises in the ground that don't seem natural. I find probes are my go-to tool in the city because you're looking for items, you're looking for features with hard walls, whether they were brick lined or one time they were wood lined. So that's where I used my probe the most.
It's trying to find brick and wood then, trying to find something that has a density to it.
Right, and that may even be a density in a wall. Doug Harris is another great DIVer. He goes and he only takes a probe. He has a skill level with a probe that he can go down and feel individual bottles. I mean, it's incredible. But, that's probably 20, 30 years of using a probe, and he's got this thing to a science that he had the best, him and his wife had the best individual bottle finds of anybody the last one.
Well, you remember, don't you, Jeff, on the Glebe farm, that pit that I got an iron signal down in it, and I ran into some trash, and I said something to Jeff about it. Jeff came over and started digging it. But in behind us, and Tony was digging a pit on down below, but there was a guy there that's all he was doing, wasn't he? Was just probing.
Yeah, he just probes. Every DIV I've ever seen him at, he just probes.
Do you remember who that was?
And does real well.
I'm sure that was Doug Harris.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy with the probe. And it's so I don't know if we can maybe talk about some other different types of pits. I don't know if Tony talked about, especially like from where you guys are out in Middle Tennessee and Kentucky. Do you guys ever find yourself around ice houses or ice holes, anything like that?
Have never heard of them.
I've really never heard of them. Yeah.
So specifically, like I know there are a lot in Virginia, especially around some of the colonial era homes. What would you find is these larger depressions in the ground, and generally they're going to be related to some sort of creek, where in the wintertime they could have backed in. They would have had either a dam for a small fishing pond where they would have held fish, but in the wintertime it would freeze over, and you'd have basically like where you could go and remove the ice and layer it down in this hole in the ground so you could have your root cellar a lot colder than it would be normally throughout the year.
You bring up a good point there. And there was an old gentleman, and most of these guys in the chat tonight are talking about that I was old and back in the Civil War and everything. I'm not that old, but I have got some age on me. But there was a guy that was a lot older than I was, and he was talking about a major hailstorm that we had in our county way, way back, probably in the 20s or 30s. And he said that hail the size of quarters just rolled down the creek. I mean, there was water with it because it was raining. But that hail pushed itself. There was a bend in the creek, and it pushed itself in the wall. And this was like a March or early April storm. And he said that they were actually able to dig ice out of that wall as late as June.
Yeah, I completely believe that. And I guess for us, what we would consider maybe a cellar hole, like up north, would be like our ice holes and things like that around here in Virginia. And I wasn't sure if they had those sort of things like out towards where you guys are.
I don't know, Jeff. That's something else for us to look for, I guess. That would
I mean, I'm sure they had to. I mean, to keep their ice and everything that. I mean, of course, I know we've got a couple of cellar holes where it has a spring running through the center of it, and then that's where they put their milk and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something worth investigating as well. So I probably would lightly probe something like that to see what the contents are like on the bottom, how deep it is. A lot of those kind of springs and stuff build up over the years with vegetation and organic matter. So that would be something that would be, you could probe pretty easily, maybe get a feel for how the probe works, and then if you could feel any glass down there.
Well, me and Jeff we just got us a couple of probes, and we haven't really done anything with them yet, but that's, and I guess summertime may not be the best time to do that because the ground gets harder and harder as it gets drier and drier, but that's definitely something that we're going to look into and see if we can get into some pits.
Yeah, and Jeff, you were talking about finding privies to older houses. I personally find that it's much difficult, way harder to find a privy to an older country house than it is, say, for one in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it, if you lived out in the country, why would you throw glass and things like that into where you'd have to dig another hole in 6 or 8 months? You'd have your trash pit out maybe on the edge of a ravine, or somewhere that you could have your servants carry it away and just dump it out of sight, out of mind, and then you could just keep using your privy hole.
Well, that makes sense. Of course, one of my big permissions, it was the house was built, like I said, in 1839. Her grandmother, the heirs of this property, her grandmother had a bottle dump, and of course it was along a old, I guess, mail road. Of course, it dates back to probably 1780s, and then, I say 1790s. And then, of course, all the bottles are off towards that old road. But, of course, the bottles I'm finding now, they're pretty new. So I guess I'm going to have to dig deeper.
Well, that's another great application for your probe. If you can start feeling the glass up top, you'll definitely know how deep it goes just by using the probe.
Another good
point.
Well,
see, the only I found a couple of cork bottles, and then of course I've dug probably about a foot deep, and then in a couple of spots, and I've run into clay. So then it's a pretty big area.
Yeah, so you'd have a pretty good guess of if it continued or not pretty quickly.
And in our area, especially up here, but also down around Jeff too, there are sinkholes, and they would use. I know we used sinkholes back in our day, and you'd throw all your old garbage and trash and things down in a sinkhole. So, and those would be almost impossible to dig because they'd sink so far.
Right. So it's another facet or to relic hunting, that you start off with a metal detector, and one day you find yourself digging giant holes in the ground that you thought a backhoe would fill it up, or just it's fun. It's like it's a wormhole. Once you start going down it, you find yourself lost in all these other things.
Yeah, then you're like.
Well, see, actually, north of here, I know there was a Confederate training camp, and then they had a deep sinkhole, and the only reason they moved the camp is because they was putting their waste in the sinkhole, and it messed their spring up. And I know where that sinkhole is to this day, but there's so much stuff that's been put on top of it. I mean, it would take you forever to dig it out.
And dangerous too, I tell you. because sinkholes can open back up if you go digging in them, and you'd need to use a lot of caution whenever you dig around a sinkhole like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey guys, we're over an hour and a half on this show. I guess we ought to try to wrap it up. We appreciate you calling in, Matt. We had a great show, I think, and got to throw out some ideas and everything. I learned something tonight, and I'm sure that everybody that listened did.
Yeah, we played Troutman again, and you guys knocked it out of the park, and I think Tony helped a little bit, but as always, a great show, fellas.
Yeah, Tony made the show tonight. There's no doubt about that, ain't it, Jeff?
That's right. I mean, he was going to be a good guest, and we knew he was going to be. So, and then thank you for calling in, Matt. I mean, you was a good call. So.
And I'll give credit to Matt. Appreciate it, and looking forward to getting back with you sometime soon, doing some digging. And I'll give credit Tony tonight. That was Jeff's grab. He scheduled this show, and I was tickled to death and looking so forward to tonight, and it certainly didn't disappoint. Tony was a great guest, wasn't he?
Sure was. Yes, don't forget about Barb. She was a good call, too. So.
Yeah, she was. And we appreciate everybody in the chat tonight. Appreciate everybody that watched, and Chris Heimsoff, his call, and everything that came about, back and forth, especially just all of our listeners. We certainly do appreciate you, that you'll tune in each week and listen to us just talk metal detecting. But anyway, you got anything to add, Jeff?
No, just thanks to everybody that's in the comment section. We couldn't do this without you, and we really appreciate it. So.
I'm looking here next week. Next week we're going to have a great show. We got Swansea from up in New Hampshire, New England area there. That's going to be a great show. I'm looking forward to that, and it will be at 8 o'clock Eastern time this next Thursday night. So we're going to go ahead and close the show out. Thanks, everybody, for being with us tonight here on Relics Radio. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Relics Radio. We really do appreciate it. Be sure and join us live each Thursday night at 7 o'clock Central Time, 8 o'clock Eastern here on Spreaker. Or you can catch the archive show at Relics Radio on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, or iTunes. Please take a minute and hit the like button, and be sure and follow us so that you'll get notifications of all of our upcoming broadcasts. You can also find us on YouTube at Diggin with 7 or Tennessee Jeff, or you can check us out on our Relics Radio Facebook page. If you'd like to get in touch with us, then send an email to digginwith7@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We hope you'll join us next Thursday night, and until then, get out there and dig some history.